Problem you have these, you go through it all and you've got it pretty much figured out in your mind and then you start over again.
Yeah, lots of numbers to keep track of.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Know if it works, I guess. Well, that's a pencil, actually. So, that's it. Yeah, it's up. I don't know.
And Doug, do you know what we have setting for revenue in that wheel tax line?
176, as far as what's in that account right now.
Yeah. If we can do it real quick.
Quick, tell me the number.
Keep going.
You guys that have been around longer have any idea when the last year was that we didn't supplement road and bridge from the general fund? Always.
Yeah.
There's basically about 108 sitting in there. This number, year-to-date revenue.
Because it gets spent.
Well, we can't leave it, right?
Yeah, it's just a check, but then comes in, goes out.
So we have been using some on some of the projects and stuff for last year.
We were 43%. We did a detailed look at the outs, which I was over on that one.
No,
So this stuff, I think, what's the real? There was no real point.
I'm gonna call this meeting to order. And the purpose of this meeting is to work on our budget for 2024.
Okay. So the problem is, if you look at the budget as it was presented previously, we were uncertain of our revenues to match up close enough to balance with our expenditures. So there was an advantage of having this meeting later than the first, because I was able to take the growth figures provided by the Director of Equalization and plug it in. So there was a substantial increase in property values because of reassessments and looking at properties more closely than had been in the past. But the good thing of that is that while we still can raise up to 3% CPI and growth, that the mill levy went down.
But won't that be for 25, not 24?
No, 24.
And the taxes that are lined up to be paid the last half, that's gonna be based on the prior
I
valuation.
talk collections, not spending.
Oh.
Yes, so the collection will be 24.
Okay.
Sorry. So anyway, so the original numbers that I gave to you on the 5th did change some, and that's why I reprinted this. So this is the actual resolution that is sent to the Department of Revenue, and it is subject to their scrutiny, then they ultimately send a letter whether it's approved or not. If it's not approved, then we have to come back. So you're familiar with that because we've had to do that before. In the lower right-hand corner of this document is where I wrote the notes. So the amount of taxes that were requested in the resolution for fiscal year 2023 was $2,359,183. If you take the CPI and growth, which then amounts to 3.25%, there will be an additional $76,000 in revenue, which gives us a new allowable tax revenue of 2.43856. The resulting levy is 1.497, and last year's was 1.508. So not a big spread, but ultimately it's worth cheering about if you're a taxpayer. So with that setting aside and returning to the agenda, my suggestions are is that you can pass this budget as it is, but I think we would draw unwarranted scrutiny because we're passing expenditures that exceed our net revenue. So the alternative is, the next bullet point, which is to remove the cash transfer from general fund to the road and bridge fund. And then once we know what the actual cash carryover is, then you can supplement the road and bridge fund as much as you are able. The alternative to that is to cut other general fund budgets to support the road and bridge budget. You can reduce within the general fund our request for that vehicle purchasing from 100,000 to 75,000. I'd recommend that we sell off our surplus property more vigorously to recoup those monies instead of just storing them.
What's the best case scenario in terms of income?
Income?
Yeah.
I give you a report of what we expect to collect for taxes only. So it's just property taxes. They don't include in our other revenue streams.
Okay, so if the surplus property were sold off more vigorously, what might we expect?
Oh, it's hard to say.
Do we have any ballpark idea?
No, probably the biggest items we're sitting on now are the 3 road graders.
Yeah.
The rest of it is office equipment, and the white car.
Those pickups? We did shed it on the rent?
Yeah, I mean, any of those vehicles, but honestly, on a public sale like that, you get maybe a dime on a dollar,
Pretty minimal.
Maybe.
maybe. But it's still the concept that we're sitting on these things. They represent an asset, but they're also a liability because we're sitting on them and we could convert them to cash.
Yeah.
So the next one would be to adopt a comprehensive spending policy, which the Department of Revenue tells us every time we meet is that we need to have, not just us, all counties, cities, school districts, need to have a comprehensive spending policy that requires for us, looking at 3 quotes for large purchases, 3 bids, 3 proposals, which we used to do. We kind of got away from it, but it gives you an opportunity to see things from different vendors. We'll go back to the lower discretionary spending limit. That's an effort just to control spending. Involving the department heads in all aspects of budgeting. So rather instead of making it a passive venture, just set up appointments, do the one-on-ones. That way you'll have a better idea of what their requests are and why. And then, yes.
Up to the required 3 quotes, I can think of a number of projects we've undertaken where there haven't even been 3 bidders.
This would be like run-of-the-mill stuff, like, you know, and I hate to say it because I believe in shop local, but there's just times that you can buy stuff elsewhere at substantial savings. And granted, it doesn't help the local economy, but it does conserve your resources.
Are they still at 50?
It's that
Requiring bids?
100,000 is.
No, 100?
And then the last one is consider implementation of a county road and bridge levy, which I think Jeff is going to talk about. So at the end of the day, I gave you a snapshot view, and the reason I call it a snapshot is because it is just a point in time. So you can look at the cash fund balance report, which looks like this. Okay, so it's also available on the website or on the agenda, so you can look at it. And that'll tell you where the cash levels are right now. And I must have misplaced mine for this year, because I'm not looking at it. But as far as last year went, as far as carryover, on the last business day of the year in 2022, we had $2.8 million in the general fund that we carried over. But the road and bridge fund was minus $698,000. So right away in the beginning of 2023, we did a cash transfer from general fund to road and bridge to bring that balance up, as well as supply with sufficient cash to carry it for a while. And then since then, we've done 3 other transfers. So the road and bridge fund hasn't had a workable balance, or carryover balance for quite a while. So how does that happen? Well, we talked about that last meeting, where inflation is exceeding faster than our revenue. So at a certain point, you have to decide, are you going to try and continue to do it, or do you stop the bleeding? So that's where you're at today. The actual resolution that I proposed to you, this deals with just the levies. And I can tell you that right now, I recalculated those using the growth item or growth measures. And you can pass this resolution setting the levies. Then you can decide whatever you want to do with the budgets, because This simply is the amount of property taxes that we're going to pay.
What do you think is the best approach?
I think, to be honest with you, is to take that $1 million transfer out until after the new year, and then reevaluate it, and then put that rollover money back into
So
the bridge.
adopt the provisional budget as is presently fashioned, and then do that as need calls
Yeah,
for.
because the alternative is you can pass this, but it's gonna look ugly. I mean, the general public's gonna say, well, you adopted a budget that has more expenditures than revenue. Nobody, their homes would do that. So my theory is that you pull it out because it's going to lower the amount of carryover necessary for the bridge, and it's a manageable amount for general fund.
What would legislative body say about this if we did it the first way?
I think we would see harsh penalties. I can't imagine any other auditor, whether it's county level, city, school, or state, looking at it and going, oh, good move, guys. Just don't think they would do it.
Well, in essence, if we do that, I'm not saying it's a bad idea or good idea or whatever, just we're then asking the highway department to basically take the full brunt of
That's up to you.
expense reductions at that point.
That's just my easy fix.
That's where most of our expenses are.
It's where most of our expenses are, but percentage wise, I mean, you're taking $1 million away from the road and bridge, it's not a small thing.
No, not by any stretch. And to be honest with you, that is the shortfall in this whole process, is that we have to project this months and months ahead. There are so many variables in play. And, you know, townships are even worse because they do theirs in March, but they don't get to see the real picture until almost a year later. You know, schools are in the middle of the year for their fiscal year, so they don't have to see the review. But those are my ideas, and I know there's people in the room that can offer you other ideas, other suggestions, so if you're content with what I've told you, then I'll sit down and you can visit with the others.
Well, the one thing that concerns me is probably roads and road maintenance is not our only function by any means, but a pretty important function of the county. And like that, like Greg Bobra, when we held that little deal at the community center after passing the wheel tax, he basically told us, if you look at state formulas for what it costs to maintain a mile of road, gravel, or a mile of oil, we're already operating the highway department at 40 cents on the dollar of what the state says it should cost to maintain those roads. And we do a pretty good job of keeping up, but I sure hate to start thinking about doing less road and bridge work. And we've discussed several times that we're the lowest tax levy of all 66 counties in South Dakota. It might be something to be proud of when you consider yourself a conservative, but it maybe just isn't workable anymore either.
Well, it never was workable.
No, it hasn't been workable for a long time, and we give up services that general fund should be taking care of things here at the courthouse or other county properties to shore up that road and bridge fund that's already operating at 40 cents on the dollar. It's to be a tough situation.
We allowed ourselves, and it wasn't this commission, but earlier commissions, to be seduced by the fiscal attraction of lowering taxes next year, and lowering taxes the year after that. And then, one fell swoop, trying to catch up. And people would tolerate it because they had been lowered, But we were in this kind of a roller coaster in terms of income all those years. And unfortunately, when we were in this position, when our tax levy was at its lowest in '96, the state said, okay, now we're not gonna allow you to raise your tax in taxable tax income any more than 3% a year. So we're stuck. That's where we've been all these years.
Can you speak up a little bit, Jim, please?
Okay.
So really, the only other way that we could generate dollars would be road and bridge, or not road, or yeah, road and bridge. But
The only way to guarantee that funding source would be to implement a new tax through the road and bridge, either for snow removal or road and bridge. But my evaluation of snow removal is if you build up a huge pot of snow removal and you have open winters, it's not gonna help you with regular maintenance.
it needs to go into
Road and bridge.
road and bridge, because it's,
And we're gonna use there, I mean,
yeah, it'll get used. I mean,
no matter what.
our bridges aren't getting any better.
But we've made some advances.
We have made, we've come a long way from when we first started. But this problem isn't gonna heal itself. I don't see how, if inflation keeps going the way it is, and we only get to go 3%, inflation's at 10, it don't take very long. Any surplus we have will be wiped out, and it'll be just about wiped out next year.
That's where we're at basically now.
Yeah, we can do 2024, but after that, we have nothing.
Right now, you're estimating the cash carryover is gonna be what? End of the year?
Well, it's very difficult to estimate anything, but I gave you the,
Well, you said-
we're expecting $990,000
Right.
property tax revenue.
And people are
But
gonna
we will have other revenues that come in as well. So does the highway department. But to actually give you a reliable forecast of that number, I can't do that.
No, but if we base it on prior year's receipts, last half receipts, that's what we should probably expect.
I would take that number and use a conservative percentage of it.
Jim, I'll tell you what I came up with, and as long as you don't hold me to these numbers, but I think it'll give us a general idea of at least how I read the numbers and see the pictures. Our cash balance today sits at, taking the general fund and then our, which is a positive balance, and then our road and bridge fund is is in a negative at the moment. We sit at probably a net of like $1.2 million in cash, and so then you add in to it the possibility of getting our revenue through the end of the year, which is roughly $1 million for taxes, and then I added up some of the other stuff. And I mean, you can't count on it, but it's probably somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000. So if I take all of it, 1.4 of additional revenue through the end of the year, then that puts us up to a cash balance of 2.6. Or not a cash balance, but that gets us revenue of 2.6 through the end of the year, and then I figured $1.5 million of expenses between now and the end of the year, based on what we have left in the budgets. And so then that sets us with a cash balance of about 1.1.
2.6 of revenue that we can use for the county or just total general fund? Yeah.
Then we can use across the board. That's including general fund and the road and bridge fund and total.
Well, under that scenario, then we could make a transfer, couldn't we?
Potentially,
Well,
but it'll be,
yeah. I mean, so, but then you got to keep in mind that in order for us to approve the budget that we're showing here, the cash applied line, we're applying $1 million of cash to the general fund to make everything balance. And we're also applying, like, what is it, $1.2 million to the road and bridge fund to make it balance.
Which leaves us with
Not much,
not much.
none, really, almost.
What are the cash flow needs for the first few months, or the first, well, till May?
We do have quite a few things that we pay upfront. but we don't pay the rest of the year. We do show up, but the advantage of my suggestion is that we see those revenues change every month. So it isn't just like, well, you're one and done in January, you see it again later in the year, and you do it again. But it just gives you a mechanism to control it without adopting a budget that's upside down. You can still have the same objective, the same numbers, you just will be able to see it a lot better after the rollover takes place.
Stark reality will be staring us in the face.
Yeah.
But Doug, isn't that the same situation that got us into that mess? Isn't that how we ended up here? The way I understood what
Well-
you said earlier?
If I were to point a finger at something, it's the fact that revenues were not looked at in any great detail for a number of years. And so I started this process where I wanted all of the departments to be able to see what all of the departments were doing. Because we are all one piece of a larger puzzle, and we all have to rely on each other, and we all pull out of the same pie. So if one person pulls a bigger sliver, the others get less. And so that's been a process that's developed over years. You know, I think everybody just kind of felt comfortable that things were riding along pretty nicely, when in reality they weren't. And I think some of that was discovered by Dan when he realized that those cash numbers that had been plugged in there should not have been fixed. It should have been a true representation of what was going on.
Yeah, because the reality of it is that we've been spending down the cash balance, but it's really not, it's been sort of hidden behind those numbers that weren't really
Right.
showing it. You'd have had to have looked at a cash balance at a given point every year. And so we've been able to function just because we've had those reserves, but now the reserve is,
To jeopardy.
the well is running low.
To use Jim's often used comment of egg on our face, when we get in a situation where we can't write a check to pay a bill, we're gonna have egg on our face. I think this is looking further into the future than just finalizing the 24 budget. We're gonna have to face the reality of convincing our taxpayers that we're gonna need an opt-out. That's what I think is, without some other,
Look at all the townships that have done it.
Yeah.
Really?
The key thing to remember, Jim, is that if you impose the road and bridge tax, it is not an opt-out.
oh, it's not.
No, because you would opt out of the current tax. This is a new tax. So it would be like Gibbler Township with an imposition of a tax to replace what they have. So the advantage of that is that the opt-out phrase on it is present, much of the same mechanism, but it's not really an opt-out. It's a new tax for specific reasons.
It would have its own line item basically, and
Yep, certainly.
plugged in. That's what this is.
That was the one that Nicole did. I sent you mine in an email or a text message, I can't remember which.
Right.
But it would go through the same process as far as publication and all that. Yeah.
You want to know more about that?
That's this one, the one
That's,
that you did?
Nicole?
No, Nicole.
So just like an opt-out would have to be enacted before the 15th of July, but I would advocate that if you're serious about it, is that we do it probably right after the beginning of the year, so that if it does get referred to a vote, we can put it on the primary election ballot.
So that we could black.
Put it on the primary election ballot,
Oh,
so we wouldn't have a special election.
Yeah.
yeah, that is an insult to injury, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Especially in the past.
But obviously that doesn't have to be decided today.
There's a lot of our townships that are using that road maintenance tax at 50 cents per thousand.
How many are there?
About 22.
Are there?
Yeah, it's quite a few.
Used to be just Ohio, right?
It
I
was,
think we had the first one.
yeah, then there was like 6 for a couple of years that started to gain.
We were in a situation of being solvent for about 2 or 3 more years. I've been treasurer for 22 years. We were in a situation of, year-to-year analysis of being solvent for about 2 or 3 more years, and we'd have been another unorganized township if it hadn't been for that, being able to use that road maintenance tax. We're finally catching up to where we gravelled a mile of road last year, and we're gonna gravel 2 miles of road this year. And that's long overdue.
I don't know if any of you guys saved that information that our delegation here provided us with at the last meeting. They had a list of 24 or 34 interventions at the state level that they were considering for purposes of enhancing county finances across the state. Because
Yeah.
not every county is in this kind of shape, but most of them
Yes.
are. There was some really good ideas on that sheet. Maybe we can cross our fingers and hope some of that stuff gets enacted too.
Well, and we could discuss,
I wouldn't
Count on it.
I wouldn't count on it, but I think we're past the point of someone coming in and saving us. We're gonna have to,
We gotta deal with it.
we gotta deal with it. And if it does come through, all the better.
All the better, but
But
I would say that we as a board should look at all those proposals and choose the one that makes the most sense to our county and get behind them, get behind trying to get that passed at the state level. And
Good idea. In the meantime, what are we gonna do now?
Well,
I don't think we need to worry too much about what the reaction of this person, this body, that governmental entity might be if we were to adopt a budget that looks like it's at least somewhat upside down. Because I don't think anybody examines it with the kind of scrutiny we do. And if those are the numbers, those are the numbers. And of course, part and parcel of adopting that kind of a budget layout would include what we're going to do after the first of the year. To make things work for the year. And I think there's a number of things on Doug's suggestion list that we could do that would make that work, in spite of the fact that it's ugly at first glance. All these things, I think, are all worthy of close examination. And you do too, or you wouldn't have put them there.
So Doug, this is the budget as of today. This is the current.
Yep. Printed that today.
you guys want to go start going back?
Provisional has to be
Well, I
done
didn't know
by
if we were
October
doing
1st.
just meetings, Jeff.
Yes, it has to be pure.
Wanna ask, I've got a
When is it
couple
published,
questions
Jan?
for him. I mean, if he's wanna-
Oh, it already was, okay.
Do you want it?
Okay, and what did that look
He
like?
said it right there.
It was the figures that we went over on the first meeting of the month. And it was essentially the same. The recommendations haven't changed. The only thing that changed is the use of the growth in calculating the levy maximums.
So the published budget, provisional budget, wasn't as embarrassing as we're talking about now.
Oh, it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As embarrassing?
yeah, it didn't get any better.
Because those detailed numbers at the department level haven't changed.
Okay, and if that's the case, How many of us heard from our constituents about that ugly looking document? What did the state say about it?
Nothing, because they don't look at it until we send it in for October.
Well, I think we're all worried about not much.
Well, I would agree with you, Jim, that I don't think it gets scrutinized probably, to the extent that maybe it should by the public, and whether that's a good thing or bad. I mean, as far as our phone ringing, it's probably, it is what it is, but I think our problem is gonna be, just like we said, we're not gonna probably have a problem for 24. We'll get through that, fine, it's gonna be 25, and we gotta come to them and say, we need $1 million in increased taxes, or we're gonna have to start cutting services. I think that's when you're gonna start seeing your phone ring quite violently.
I would agree with you.
Because, I mean, yeah, I would agree that we don't, I mean, I don't really pay that much close attention statewide, say, to our budget stuff, but as soon as we have an issue, then it starts getting covered, and then you start hearing about it, and just like, the capital or whatever tax, this new levy, I don't think we're probably at a point where we need to decide on it, but I do think that we need to start having the conversations about it, so people are aware of this is a thing that probably is coming down the road, and that we can ask for a smaller amount and initially, and not have to say, we absolutely need X amount of money here to function. We probably should step in
Get ahead of it.
a little bit proactive. But anyway, if we want to. Yeah.
You wanna have Jeff come up?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I would agree, I think there's gonna have to be news items that. There is some silver lining on the budget, we got 4 townships, that's 100 miles of road, we're not gonna have to maintain any longer, that's gonna help load. We've been working on our roads for 10 years now, we've ground them up 13, 14, and we got 15 more miles to get back to oil, and after that, we'll be on a more regular basis on our oil roads, and that's gonna take quite a little off the top. We're getting a lot of room on our gravel road. We got 180,000 tons sitting in the pile right now, so we spent some money, but we went on gravel every road we got now, we need 300,000 tons. So, we just bought 3 new blades. My plan is to keep the hours down on the blades, but with using the groomers, and I think we go out in the spring, we get them shaped up, and then groom them the rest of the year, because they're done for less than half the money, and I think they do a terrific job. That's my opinion, but they save money, and they do the job, and the big thing about those, we gotta have weed control. That costs money if it's not being controlled. So that's
You're talking about banding shoulders then.
down the shoulders. Look at those low grass, but right now, we have to right now, so.
Yep.
Those weeds are tough to deal with.
Are there any long-term equipment purchases that could be forestalled?
So
I know that's no solution.
Yeah, we're setting pretty good on our equipment. The only thing we got that's old is our chip spreader and our paver, but they'll function. Chip spreader alone, it's obsolete. If we break something on now, we're gonna have to buy a used one, buy something.
What's the life expectancy of the plug mill?
Oh, gosh, I would throw 50 years at it.
Really?
What, we still have the old graders?
We do. We've been busy, we've been plugging away at getting the snow equipment transferred over.
Right.
They're basically ready, I can tell, that's probably this weekend, get them in the papers.
So what do you think? I mean, and we're not gonna hold you to any value. What do you think values are?
Well, let's use the equipment on graders, when you get past 10,000 hours, really hits you hard. I'm gonna throw 75 at the best one, and we got one that's used all, needs a motor, I don't know what that'll bring.
Scrap iron.
Right.
25.
If you get 150, I'd be surprised for all 3 of them. Earlier, I thought we'd get 250, but man, things have changed. Who's gonna come across with a little money? That came to 57,000, it's not a huge deal, but it's, look at that back.
So you've got in here for, which it looks like a new line for 23, this STP supply stuff, and that was, from what I gather, project, or you pick a project that you can do, and it's at 250,000 for both this current year and for next year's. Are you planning on using that for this year and next year? Or do you have a project in mind that you're using that for?
You know, it's just a surface transportation program. You can use it for gathering oil, and we generally use it when the supply line runs out. But,
Okay.
and that's another fund. If you have a project that can't wait 5 years to save the money, you can save the money ahead too. But if you need to do it, you can borrow off that STP fund for 0% interest. If you had a project that was going to cost $1.5 million and it had to be done, you could do that. And then they would just keep your fund till the balance was paid off. You know, right now we get the check. We don't have anything that we're saving money for. So far I haven't had to. If we had a bad flood and we had 2 bridges falling in the creek, you know, we could use that.
So you're right now, you're not using that.
We're getting a check every year. We don't have a project in set for it, and we haven't borrowed against it, so we'll just get that check every year.
So between your, I'm talking for this current year, between your supply line and that STP line, there's about 750,000 remaining on that. Do you feel like you'll probably use the rest of that up to the end of the year?
Right now, I just figured it, and we're probably gonna carry, we got about $75,000 cushion.
And then the $100,000 for the equipment, is that for next year? Did you have something in mind for that, or that's just kind of a number just to?
Well, I've been putting that in there. We need some dump trucks, but we surplus 2 of them this last auction. We didn't get 2 buses, we bought 2 semis. So I've been borrowing the city's trucks, they've been helping out pretty good. I've been helping them out back too, so we work together on that, so that helps. But yeah, we're in need of a couple of dump trucks.
Need it one.
Dump trucks.
Dump trucks.
Are we missing any federal or state grant money that would help the highway department? And when I say that, I know it's just more taxpayer dollars, but
Yeah,
if they've got that money put away already, where we're looking at having to raise our taxes to solve a problem, if they've got money laid away and some other county is applying for it and getting it and we're not, do you think we're missing any of that kind of stuff? That
if we are, I'm not aware of it. No problem, 7,000.
I've been on the
Doing
phone
that
this
out there.
week. I can't find anything new to qualify for unless we wanted to do a big downtown project. Once around about.
close no. But some of these situations where they take our tax dollars and squirrel them away, and we're like, oh, we didn't know that you've been laying funds aside and
Yeah.
so.
It's out there, I'm not aware of it, the LTAP people are usually on top of that. If it was out there, they'd be knocking on your door. You'd hear about it, and
Good.
they'd basically walk you through it and say, sign here, I make sure you get the money. But it's not out there, not that I'm aware of. One more so reminding our bridges, we've got most of our bridges in some kind of a grant plan now, but they're going to get replaced. They counted them up this week too. There's 11 bridges that are not on a replacement plan or grant plan. And those are bridges that are under that 50% sufficiency rating, and after they get that low, they're not going to replace them. Out of those 11, 4 of them are basically grass trails. They won't be qualifying anyway, so they're coming up with a bridge program.
That's just what we were saying.
Yeah,
So glad we're in that program.
it's a good program. Between the wheel tax and the rate funding, it's gonna go a long ways to get these bridges fixed.
Right. Still have to have a little match there, I guess, funds, but
Either the wheel tax is basically gonna cover most of that match. We'll probably have to come up with some more money to help on some of them. But, and that's in the future too. Them numbers can change also. But right now, it looks pretty good.
Somebody made the observation that we're getting done for 40 cents on the dollar, what other counties are paying $1 for in their highway departments. Does that include wheel tax and the bridge money? Or is that on top of the 40 cents?
that was
That was,
Jim was
that
talking
was,
about
that
that.
was a comment that Greg Bavra
Yeah,
made about, that was 2 years ago that we passed the wheel tax, or was it 3 now?
2,
Anyway,
so it's pre-wheel tax.
it was post, we'd already passed the wheel tax, and then we have that informational meeting. But he said that day, he went and talked to Jeff, and he says he took the number of miles of oil that we had and the number of miles of gravel that we had that we were maintaining. And he said the state says a mile of oil should cost this much, and a mile of gravel should cost that much. And he said, I remember his exact comment, our $2.4 million highway department budget was $3 million less than what it should be. He said, I'm not saying raise 2.4 to $3 million, it's $3 million less than what it should be.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, a little quick math, it's like, okay, so we're running a highway department at 40 cents on the dollar of what the state says it should cost to take care of a mile of oil or a mile of gravel. And so that's why I hate to go very hard on cutting into our highway department, you know. How many times have I made the comment that I go to a county conference or a roads conference, and that parking lot is full of $65,000 to $80,000 crew cab diesel pickups, and Jeff's there in a wore-out old white 2000 whatever Tahoe, you know. It looks like it maybe shouldn't have made it there and back. But it, like Jeff says, it gets me from point A to point B, so I don't need a $80,000 pickup to get around. And
No, so there's 5 major costs. Wages is probably number 1, and that's something we haven't talked about, but we need to. We're gonna have to talk about that because counties around us are raising as much as 20%. Southern County just gave it, guys, in January, they're gonna put the $4 an hour raise. All the counties around us are doing the same thing. So that's,
We just lost a county employee to the state.
yeah. So I hate to bring it up, I don't like to be that guy, but we're gonna have to do something. I think if we're gonna get in line with everybody else, it's gonna be a 15% raise, and that sounds out of line, but it's really not when you look at everybody else. But that's what we discussed for another day too.
we won't even entertain that discussion until we've got a tax increase in place. That won't ever work. I'm not saying it's not necessary, but I'm saying it won't work where we're at now.
No, it's not. So then the other revenue cover, that's another major expense, and I think we're doing okay there. I think we're gonna be all right. I really do, especially these public roads getting saving our skin. The other roads, I think we're okay. Equipment, I think we're okay on our equipment too. You know, we can have a breakdown, but I don't think it's gonna be anything major, nothing we can't work through. So, and the bridges, and the bridges are, I think we're starting to get it, I really do. So things are tight right now, and probably gonna get tight, it's about, nobody knows what inflation gonna do, but it's not helping at all. But I guess I'm not ready to really talk, it's close, it's tight, but.
Doug wants to take $1 million from you. You good with that?
Right now, guys.
I
I recommend that for getting everybody involved in the revenue end of this. You never have been involved in, you're right, people need to know. Yeah.
I'll second the motion.
I don't know, that's all I got. I don't know what else you need from me.
Answer my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a.
Wait. Half,
We need to do this budget now, but this doesn't help us now.
I don't think we have much choice other than to pass the budget as is. It's what we published, it's what we told people we planned on doing. As far as the cash transfer from road to bridge, we'll do what we can do when we have to do it. Right?
Yeah.
You,
You're wanting to
my
take you're wanting to take the millions and Jeff is to move it till the first of the year, so we know where he's at.
Right.
It's not like we're taking the money away, but it's to get us in a better footing on, and make our budget look somewhat reasonable.
Yes. Yeah, and so what you, originally I said you have two mechanisms, you either raise revenues, which isn't gonna happen, or you control spending. Now, this is one of two ways to control spending, is you either just pull it out now, wait till the rollover so you can see what's actually there, supplement or do the transfer at that time, and then you can do it again later in the year when there's more revenue there. But you'd still need to control spending and watch revenue very, very closely.
Well, the reality of it is, we simply can't remove $1 million from the road and bridge. It wouldn't, that's not reality, so.
No.
So I guess
But we need to keep
look-
a closer eye on how it's being spent, or where our revenue is
Right, and I
coming.
think it's gonna be a lot easier, like Dan asked for those to be included in the agenda. Well, we process bills in the middle of the month too,
Right.
and so I might start sending them twice a month instead of just waiting until once a month.
do we know what percentage of our revenues should be expected to be collected first half as opposed to second half?
I could only guess.
We were 54%, a little, like a
I
month
mean,
ago.
it just depends on when people decide to pay.
Well, I mean, some people come in there and pay the whole year
Right.
first.
Right.
First.
sounds like very few though, but sounds good. When I got it, I thought,
Seems like that's sort of crucial to our cash flow.
It is.
yeah,
So far, we should be collecting numbers, 6,600,000.
I couldn't hear.
what was that? Sorry.
The tax, so far the taxes we do September 18th, I think. We collected 6,160,000.
Kim, you're gonna have to come up front.
We can't hear you.
Well, you're not good enough.
Just from January 1st till September 18th, we've collected $6,160,944.43 in taxes.
Out of an expected
Of
annual of
this
what?
annual year. Last year, I think it was a little over $10 million.
So it's fairly close.
But those are all taxes.
Yeah, I know. But that's
Yeah.
fairly close by the calendar and by the percentages.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Are some of those recent fines in that budget? That we kind of had talked about. Are any of those in that reduction right now?
I don't believe so.
If we don't do anything, does the provisional budget as published just stand?
No,
Okay, what do we need to do?
We have to.
you have to adopt that resolution, converting it to the annual.
Okay, where's that? I didn't see it.
And then should we-
That's,
Oh,
this is it, right?
should make that.
So if you decide to do that, just pick one and you would all
Yeah,
sign.
Right.
But everybody got their own copy.
We have that one.
There it is.
You got
Cool.
the resolution for the budget. It's basically leaving it as is.
Right, when you pass that resolution, you're approving this summary of ins and outs.
That wouldn't include, we would have to make an alteration to that if we're gonna do the $1 million.
I think Jones's idea is to pass it as is.
No, not if it requires $1,000 or $1 million from the highway department, if that's what it says.
No,
No,
Oh, okay.
no, that was a suggestion. That budget that's before you was the same ins and outs as you saw on September 5th.
Okay.
So if we wanted to make a change, you would have to
Redraw.
revise that.
everything and then we'd have to.
Yep, or you make, like, let's say that you want to cut $2,500 from my budget.
Mhm.
You would make a motion to reduce my budget by $2,500. And then if you want to reduce Arlen's by $50, each one of those would be a separate motion because statute requires any modification of the budget after its publication as provisional to its adoption as annual has to be reported in detail.
We're gonna have to essentially start over, if that's the approach you use. Okay.
If you decide to go budget by budget,
Right.
modifications, yes. But that doesn't lock you in because this budget is dynamic. So even after you adopt it and we move into 2024, you still have the ultimate control over this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, do you need a motion?
Well, just one second. So these suggestions that you have under the department head, like the weed and pest one, and then just pulling the 5,000 from the sheriff, those aren't in the current budget.
No, those are, I sent an email around and asked anybody if they had ideas on how to bring us closer to
But
zero.
if we wanted to do that, then that's when we would.
You can do
Make a
that
motion.
now, or you can do that after the budget's approved.
So we can.
That's just a matter of spending control.
Discussing weed and pest, I see we've got some of our weed and pest board here. Maybe they've got some input. I'm assuming you guys are aware that we have had some discussion about eliminating the mechanical part of our weed and pest board and hiring that spraying done by our two local contractors. Seeing if that would save us any money. Is you guys any input on that or any thoughts?
You're gonna have to call somebody forward.
Or
I think you're gonna have to call somebody forward.
Yeah.
I don't think this is much difference today. Budget is.
So I sit down with Randy the other day and we reviewed his budget, we looked back at previous years. And so under personal services up there at the top, we ended up taking 34,785 out of that salary line. And so that reduced that personal services section by that almost $35,000. I gave some more thought to that discussion today, and Randy said he's just always kind of assumed he would end up with maybe 4 full-time employees to spray, and it just doesn't ever happen. And so that's why that budget has been way over
Bloated.
for several years. So we cut it down more to reality of what it has been running. But then, like Jeff said, if he wants to run the graders less and run the groomers more, we need to get those shoulders sprayed and keep the weeds down, banding those shoulders. So I think would you say in order to keep those shoulders banded, we would have to get those probably 4 full-time employees instead of maybe 1.5 or 2 full-time employees?
It only takes one person to road down. Because the whole thing's going to tank with you, to carry on the chemical with you. You can do it 3 or 4 loads before you get water again.
So we would have to add some back into that reduced $34,785 number that we reduced that personal services section by, and then we took $4,125 out of his chemical line because he's never really spent the full chemical budget. But if we start banding roads consistently, that's also going to go up quite a little.
Right.
And then on the back, Randy does take in a little revenue. Some jobs of spraying, we put in $3,500 of revenue. Now, that $5,700 that I added in as revenue, Doug says that isn't correct to add that in as revenue because that money automatically goes into his budget. So that is not a true increase in revenue, that $5,700. Because Randy said that money comes in and goes into the general fund, but he says he doesn't ever get it, but Doug says it does actually roll in that.
Well, it comes from the state.
Yeah.
It's a state grant, and then if he does work for people for hire.
So we reduced that $172,000 budget number, output number to 124.
133.
Okay.
Well, we subtracted the revenue off of there, but we need to, 124,605, we need to add that 5,700 back in, because that should not have come out. So we now have a total budget of 133,05, $130,305, as opposed to 72,715, which is what it was. So we're still a considerable reduction. But like I said, we would have to add, to keep the mechanical part of that department, we would have to add quite a little bit more back in for chemical to band roads and some more back into labor to make that work.
I figured up today what it cost us to spray a mile of road.
Pardon?
I figured up today what it cost us to spray a mile of road. 2 rangers, 2 guys. The labor's $23.37. And fuel, I figure, is about $3.70. And if we were in oil changes, that'd be $5. And then wear and tear is $1.75.
That'd be both sides of the road.
And you're talking banding,
No, that's just doing spot spray.
your normal spray.
Right now, we park, one guy goes 4 miles one way, one guy goes 4 miles the other way. Then, I got per hour too. Or per mile. It's $8.90 per mile.
To spray the shoulders?
Yeah, or spray the whole ditch. Spot spray the whole ditch.
What was the total per mile?
890.
35.63. For 2 people and 2 rangers.
Are those people, would they be participating in our insurance programs?
No.
And they also wouldn't be participating in South Dakota retirement?
No.
Okay.
Alan is working for free half the time.
Okay.
If he works 40 hours, he only gets paid for 20.
I'm just saying it's pretty cheap labor. We don't have to pay those sorts of things.
That's skin of hole, or is that just the man of machine?
That's just a known.
That's just the labor, you know. Sure, yeah.
Is there
Seems-
not any
seems
difference if you hired a local contractor to do it compared to what it costs?
These two guys worked
I
on.
see you got a per hour cost and per mile cost. I just, per hour, that's gonna vary, obviously the per mile is, how many miles are in the county, I assume. Per hour is gonna vary, so I just didn't know if it was broken down per mile at all. Well, some compared to the projected budget that Randy has, if you did terminate the fin side of the weed board, compared to hiring a contractor to do it.
Is the difference, is the per mile banding shoulders and the per hour, like hand spraying or spot spraying thistles probably?
Right.
I assume,
Yeah.
that's why it's probably broke down. Because they probably know how fast they're gonna run, banding shoulders. Spot spraying is,
Just unsure of how much depends on how many weeds there are, obviously.
Sometimes we real bad at to go 11 mile an hour.
He was asking about that.
you know,
in the past.
What was that, Gary?
So, the contractors, it's in that ballpark of $30 a mile to band plus chemical.
well, you guys as a weed board, are in a position to offer advice or input to this board. I mean, that's part of your job as a weed board. What do you see as advantages or downfalls of if we would eliminate the mechanical part of our weed department and hire it done? I mean, can you, there's gonna be something that, even though we've given a lot of thought to this, there's gonna be something that we're gonna go, well, we didn't think of that. I'm sure it happens all the time, so.
I guess in the question that I asked is, we know, Randy's budget proposal is, you have prior years, so you know that's gonna be pretty spot on.
Yeah.
With the third part here, or the hiring of contractors, do you have a bid that he's saying it's gonna 100,000, we'll do the county, or, because what I saw is just a per hour rate more or less, or per mile, which I guess, do you have it well down, there's X amount of miles in the county, so we are confident that it's gonna be 75,000 versus Randy's 24,000.
130 or whatever.
Is that something you have to, or is that something you have to bid out? To put out as asking for bids,
Yes,
and then you get your guarantee.
Well, these are estimates that were obtained. They're not bids.
Sure, to keep your bids.
I just feel like that's something we need to know before we terminate the
Come on. Functioning. There you
How
go.
many miles of roads do you do, Randy?
Was there 750 miles of road?
Well, it was 190, but I was 200 miles of township road, gravel road, I mean, 20 out of road. So, I'm more concerned about gravel road basically, so.
Well, how many miles of county roads total were that?
Four 435.
I mean, here's
Then we'll do it
the
twice.
top of band, this is the banding down here, but here's the 26, plus $10 per 10, 36. Minus 2,000.
About 29,000 a day.
No, that's for just spot spraying.
Chemical.
Randy, did you guys only approach one business about this, or did you ask?
I didn't do any of these guys,
But I mean, there's a couple different companies in the community that do that.
Right,
I mean, so did you ask the other ones to see if they would be comparable?
yeah, we've talked to, I've talked to several, I guess, talked to Randy Fanning as well. Got some numbers there, they're very comparable, I guess. So,
So you could feel comfortable, this sideboard back here was, do you really want to terminate it until you know for sure that this is gonna be where you're at?
No,
Right.
that's what I said, this discussion started 2 years ago, and then it got dropped, and now we've got a tight budget, and just looking at, I mean, if it's apples and apples when it comes to money, then there's probably not a reason to change anything. If we get it done for half, every place you save $50,000 or $75,000 starts adding up in a hurry, but we would have to, I guess if we approve the budget with keeping the weed department in it and just put together some good solid numbers as to what the chemical spraying ditches or banding the roads, either way is probably, it's a wash. It's gonna be the same either way, because didn't both of them tell you guys that if we could get the chemical cheaper than they could sell it to us, we could get our
right,
own
yeah,
chemical?
they were okay. They were, I think they can get the chemical.
Mr. Sheriff, if I may, I'm Brenda Severs, I'm with the Department of Ag and Natural Resources. I'm the Plant Industry Program Manager, and one of the programs that's underneath my control with the state is the Weed and Pest Program. I've been dealing with the Weed and Pest Program actually when I was Beetle County Weed Supervisor, so I go back close to 30 years with the weed programs. If I may just offer another idea here or suggestion that the Weed and Pest Department is actually more than just spraying the county roads or the township roads or that type of thing. It's actually more than that. It's the Weed and Pest Program and the State Noxious Weed Program also involves making sure that those areas that people have, essentially the neighbor-to-neighbor relations that sometimes get to be a challenge. So the county weed board can do enforcements as far as dealing with those complaints. And I know that I was actually at a weed board meeting here, I believe it was last year, the year before, and where the county had dealt with a rather bad issue and got the landowner to do the control on their weeds. So it is more than just doing the spraying of the roads, it's also making sure that the landowners are responsible for controlling the noxious weeds. And sometimes when you have those neighbor-to-neighbor relations where there's an issue, and as I say, 90% of the time where there's a noxious weed problem, there's usually a people problem that's involved that's an underlying issue. And so the weed board does do more than that. They are the ones that determine which ones are requested the State Weed and Pest Control Commission. The locally noxious weeds, we have the 7 state noxious weeds, but also the county has local noxious weeds that are a problem here as well. And so I would stand by and answer questions. I also have got with me Dennis Spiker. He is on the State Weed and Pest Control Commission. He is the District 1 representative, so covers this area. And as a sideline, he's also a county commissioner up in the Brown County area, former legislator too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to see a good representation of the Han County Weed Board. I mean, obviously, these people take the noxious weed problem seriously. There's a distinct difference between banding on county roads, and noxious weeds. And I don't know what Han County has designated for noxious weeds, but I know that leafy spurge, yellow toadflax, wormwood, those are all weeds that Randy has to deal with if a landowner calls. And I think that's probably a very important position in a county. Somebody has to take those complaints. Somebody has to deal with them. A contractor, unless you have a specific number if it's 100,000 or 75,000, you leave it up to miles of road and, chemical costs and labor costs, you really haven't got control, because you don't know where that's gonna go. I think that, you're gonna have somebody in the county, excuse me, somebody in the county that'll take complaints. If you have a neighbor-to-neighbor problem, I would take the recommendation from the league board and try to somehow maintain your weed program. Very important. Someday, this land will be passed off to somebody else, and the weed board and the weed supervisor are really very much in education. They need to educate the public as to what is out there, and a contractor probably isn't gonna do that. He's not gonna have the time, he isn't gonna bid to do that particular thing, so if you have any questions, be happy to try and answer, and thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Do you know how many counties are doing it through private companies?
Pardon me?
Do you know how many counties are involved in the private acquisition of weed services as opposed
I'm
to?
really not, I don't know if Brenda has any idea.
I don't have an actual number, I didn't look that information up, they don't always tell us that information. One of the complaints that we do hear, and I know of some counties that actually went that route, have now turned back around because they want local control. When a contractor typically comes into a county and does the spraying, they're there, they spray what's there at that time, but then you might have something that crops up 3 weeks later that they're not able to get back to, which is one of the reasons why when you have your weed supervisor and your own equipment already in place, then you can go out and take care of those issues as they become a problem. So I can't give you the exact number as to how many counties that actually do contract out. I know there are some that do. I know there's some that actually have different scenarios as far as how their weed department or their weed supervisor has other functions as well as the weed board. There's been several that have done different things that way, but essentially there is a bigger aspect as far as not just spraying away the roads. And as far as the banding, like Dennis was just talking, a lot of counties, and just from being a former weed supervisor, the banding was always considered a highway shop expense because it was a highway expense. It was not necessarily for noxious weed control versus the noxious weed control that you're doing in the ditches was actually for those noxious.
I gave that some consideration today too, that is not a noxious weed issue, that is highway maintenance issue.
Which gives you
So,
some
yeah,
additional
that's more
funding.
of your department, Joe.
Just off the top of your head, county of 1,440 square miles and 430 miles of roadway that needs to be maintained, be road weeds on. Are our costs exorbitant? Are they especially low?
I mean, if you wanted to, I could have Doug pull up, I don't have the 2022 numbers up on the Department of Ag's website, but if you wanted to compare what the budgets were for other counties, even in the surrounding area, we could have Doug pull that up, because like I say, it's on our website from 2021. I could do the micro figures.
Well, is there anything that strikes you as especially unusual about our
I
numbers?
believe when I was a weed supervisor in Beetle County, and I've been with the state now 22 years, but I think when I left, we were already close to 100,000 then. I mean, so if that gives you an idea, I don't know.
We're up to 300,000 now.
Well, but I mean, that's what I'm saying, I'm just figuring for 22 years later, we could go ahead and look and see, like, let's say, hey, Hyde County is similar in size, I don't know what their budget is without looking it up.
Well, they're half our size.
But I mean, I'm talking road size,
Oh,
sorry.
Here's a thought is, after getting Randy's numbers down for noxious weed control, continuing to do what he does with the people that he's been working, the amount of labor force that he's been working with, if we're cutting his $172,715 down to $130,305, which would be a more realistic number because his chemicals would still be about the same as what he's been using. So that's a considerable reduction in his budget numbers doing what he's doing now. And then maybe Jeff hires the two local contractors or one of the two local contractors to band shoulders. Because that truly is. That's not a noxious weed issue. That is not a state law required noxious weed issue. That's a road maintenance issue. And, you know, and Randy can probably get along with noxious weeds with the amount of labor that he has been using. It would be somewhat hard, because Randy would really have, if he's gonna ban shoulders, he would really have to kind of track that, and it's gotta be a highway department expense. It's not a noxious weed issue. That's a highway department expense, and like Jeff said, if he can ban them shoulders, and it saves him money being able to run the groomers more than run the graders, it would probably save you, running the groomers more, would probably save you enough expenses to pay for that banding, do you suppose? I don't.
Absolutely, it would.
So maybe that's a solution, leaving, because we have taken a lot of money out of that budget. It's just never been corrected at any point in time. It was there. He was kind of planning on, what, 4 or 5 full-time employees?
3.
Or 3,
That's what we always budgeted for.
but like I said, if we get that down to a more realistic number, we've taken a lot of money out of that budget, and if Jeff hires that banding done, then Randy doesn't have to have more labor force than what he's already got. He can just focus on the noxious weeds, which is what his department is in place for.
Got a question. Does the weed board, you bid for chemicals every year? It bids for chemicals. But I think it's an excellent idea to find out if the banding on shoulders could be a contractor provided service versus, how much time it takes for Randy to do that particular job. And just a little side note, my passion for weed control started when I was a little kid. Our dad didn't take us fishing and hunting. We went out driving township and county roads, and we went looking for leafy spring spots. And so I grew up with a passion to kill leafy spurn, and we had to, after milking cows, we had to get up and go out and pull woodwood sage out of the tree rows. I hate it. Kill it. But anyway, you need a weed program. You need a noxious weed control program so that the public, and you need public relations, and that's what the weed board, county weed board, needs to be an education source to control noxious weeds, because there's new stuff coming all the time. I mean, we're talking, things, we never had yellow toadflax in our area, and today, coming down here, I called our weed supervisor in Brown County and told him of 3 spots along Highway 281 north of Aberdeen that have got yellow toadflax. And so it's coming. If you haven't got it in Han County, it's coming. So, thank you.
One other suggestion for you is that, if you did want to have the weed department spray it, you could always have the highway department purchase the chemical and work out something between the two on labor. Obviously, if you have an extra person and if it's a part-time person, you're not paying the retirement, the benefits that you would for a full-time person, and just offer that up as well. That there are those types of things that can work between departments.
Well, I would make a motion that we amend Randy's request of 172,715 to 130,305.
130,305.
Yes,
133.
130,000.
That's another one.
Yep, 305. And on the topic of having a weed supervisor or contact person, since this discussion has come back up, that has been bounced around this table quite a little, and I think we're kind of all of we've said maybe some other county employee, we've said maybe the county vice chairman would do it until, then the next county vice chairman would have to take over that job. And I think we had a whole lot of an opinion of not it. To tell the truth. No, this is, I took that 124,000, I added that 57,000 back in, because Doug said that automatically rolls into that, into your budget. So we should have a budget, and I will help Randy get that budget rewritten to,
I just changed the bottom line, you can rework the lines anytime.
yeah, well, I know what all we changed, so we will rewrite that to total $130,305.
And I'll just say, just to level set on everything, because I think there was a question back here as far as the cost of contractors and why this conversation has gotten as far as it has, is on initial look of what we've got from the contractor and what he's given us as an estimate, and again, it's just an estimate, but what he was giving us to spray the whole county at however many, 425 miles of road, was coming in at, even using this lower budget, was coming in at about 60 or 70% of our current budget. So, I mean, it was enough of a potential savings, obviously. Again, like they're talking, we would then no longer have a point person for weed supervisor and all that, so we got to figure out what premium we want to pay for that. But anyway, just so everybody's aware that was rough figuring. I mean, it was a 30-40% savings is why we took a hard look at it, potentially.
And we also had discussion about liability concerns with people operating these machines, and as I think the weed board probably well knows that we've had instances in the past where young kids are out there spinning donuts in the roads and whatever else, that stuff that they shouldn't be doing. I'm sure they got reprimanded when they found out who done it, but we can't ignore the fact that we have some liability concerns with this functional and operational part of a weed department. So that would be.
Comment?
Yeah.
I guess, as far as contracting, I served on the Brown County Commission for 20 years and was always a little hesitant of contracting, because you get far enough years into contracting, they kind of got a hold of you. They got control of you. And if you need to go back and set up again to go back into the program, you're missing something. And so I've always been, they can lowball you, start you out kind of nice, and then next year it's 80,000, then 100, then 150. Then you have to stop and reevaluate the whole thing. You might have been better off keeping your weed supervisor and hanging on. So, and I mean, in regards to, like, for example, motor graders, truck equipment, that kind of thing, I know some of the counties now, rather than going out and bidding a $350,000 new motor grader, would put a $40,000 or $50,000 engine in a machine that's got 10,000 hours on it, or $25,000, $30,000 transmission, and keep what you got, and keep moving on that way. So, anyway, whatever, that's all work.
If I might also, my husband and my daughter both work for me. And I've heard stories of being out there. They have found pipe bombs. They have found meth lab dumps. They have been out there. There are extra eyes on the county all the time looking at stuff. And them being out there at $35 a mile or whatever really isn't all that expensive when you talk about eyes all over the county watching us, having those things cleaned up. And I'm looking at, pipe bomb was found. I mean, it was a pretty big deal, and it was taken care of very carefully, but it was them that found it. When they found it, it had not been. So, and I know one time there was a huge fire out, wasn't it by Terry, by Howard's place, right? Yeah, it was by Howard's place.
And the weed board went in with their machines, with their mowers and stuff like that, to help get down in that creek, to get that fire put out. And that was, essential in getting that taken care of. And he was there to help out 100%, so.
See there, we've got a whole bunch of input we haven't even thought of.
Well, is that issue, is there consensus, do you think, on this?
Yeah.
I made a motion to
I made a motion to
I'll second.
change budget.
change Randy's budget.
Can I ask a question in discussion here, just very briefly? If we pass this motion, which I'm about to second if I haven't, does that mean we've already made a decision about the long-term existence of this department, or at least for fiscal '24?
I would say yes.
Okay,
We've approved the budget.
so then I'll second the motion formally if I hadn't.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion. Let's revise this budget.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Randy.
That'll make difference over here.
Yep, we'll change that. How hard is it to revise your one
We have
page?
enough now?
So this is no longer good.
That is, as long as I have each of these motions,
Oh, then
and I
you
just changed the worksheet.
oh, okay, gotcha. You'll change what goes to the state.
I guess the big thing,
We haven't made a budgetary decision.
No,
the only, I guess, I should say the only thing on the table, the big thing would be that whether we want to include that $1 million in there, right?
My understanding is stays. Is that different than you guys?
That's what we had in our provisional as published budget. Yeah,
It was in there.
stay.
I think we have to do it.
I said it is meaningless because we're going to do it anyway, so.
Yes.
And like Doug suggested, as we get closer to the end of the year, maybe you're gonna have to scrutinize.
There's no question we're gonna have to scrutinize it.
Or that,
There's no question we're gonna have to scrutinize it, I don't think.
Well, we can't spend money we don't have. That's for
Right.
sure.
Can I just ask that, going back to Doug's suggestions on the quotes and the bids, a couple of years ago, I came to you to ask you to buy me a new desk, the stand-up desk that I have, and you made me go out and get quotes for it, and you get a couple of quotes for it. And I had the money in my budget, because I had been sitting on it and saving it for a new desk. Can I ask that we go back and revisit that process again too?
I think a whole bunch of these suggestions that Doug has, we will really look at. And they're excellent suggestions. In my view.
Shane, was your contribution just a gift, or you want to talk about it, or?
That was an
Leave it
armband by maybe me.
Maybe $5,000 back. Yeah, are you still twisting his arm? Yeah, working.
That's as much as I could without getting the taser out, I think. So.
I'll ask for a tax later.
Did-
No, that's, part of the upfitting of my vehicle. So being as we have that vehicle fund that I consulted to include in that, take it out of my budget, so.
Okay. What? We don't need to take any action on that.
It's good as it sits there.
and we've had a lot of,
Did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to be on there just in case.
Defensive move.
we have had a lot of discussion about rotating vehicles. We might have to take a hard look at stretching those things out a couple more years, I don't know.
Okay, I made a motion to adopt the budget, but then,
No, you made a motion on this.
To make a modification.
Modification.
No, he made that one.
I
Yeah, you
mean,
seconded
And
it.
you seconded it.
Yes.
You voted on it, but
You can vote on it though.
We voted on it.
Yeah, we voted on this. On the
I'm-
rest.
I'm-
We haven't
Yes.
done,
Okay, and I made a motion.
but we never got a
Right,
second.
but there's a motion on the table.
To approve resolution 19.
The provisional budget as published.
Is what he made. Just so everybody knows.
I never heard him make a motion.
He did it a long time, but then we jumped to
Then we got in the
Randy
weeds.
and.
We got out of the weeds.
We got in the weeds.
The weeds.
So we're back.
Okay.
We got a motion. To adopt this resolution, the budget resolution.
Before we get that far, and I don't know if we can do this in which order, but one of the other suggestions that Doug had on his, for the budget is to reduce that new vehicles, that new vehicle purchase line that we had put in the commissioner's budget for 100,000 to just be vehicles. As far as I have heard, Shane in the sheriff's office, the only one that's said that they
Don't need it.
would,
not that much.
that they're going to use it, and he's assured me that it's gonna cost no more than 60,000. And so,
You want me to say it?
yeah, if you,
The vehicle that I believe would save us the most money is the Explorer, it's about 5,000 more than the other, than the Dodge Durango. I've done a lot of research and appears to be a better vehicle that'll last longer than the Durangos, they're not lasting very long. But also, we're replacing an Explorer, so my equipment will be able to switch straight over. I won't have to purchase new cage, new consoles, things like that add up.
So adjust it down by how much?
I don't know exactly.
65.
Roughly.
But,
so it's at 100, and I think that was because we didn't know if somebody, another department might come into there, but nobody else has spoken up that I've heard of, so I would suggest that we just plan on the one vehicle and put it at 65,000.
60 down for it.
65 or 60.
We'll go 65, that gives us enough amount to supplement. I don't, he's getting to it.
Well, that can be done
After.
afterwards.
Well, if you modify any aspect of that worksheet, it has to be done by motion.
Or did we do that with the weed board then?
Yes.
Yeah, we have done it, okay. Then if that is,
Why don't you make the motion?
I would move that we reduce that new vehicle purchase line from 100,000 to 65,000.
second, my motion as amended. It's fine. So,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that amendment passed.
Sheesh.
But we still can vote on this because still fill this in to pass.
Right, we have to do that by name, don't we?
The language of that resolution will not change. These motions allow me to change the worksheet.
Okay. The resolution we have to vote on individually, correct?
Great.
I would move for its passage.
Do I hear a second?
What was the motion?
This one.
Move it.
The provisional.
No one still make any difference to pass.
I have them recorded.
Okay, if you don't make any difference to pass that.
Second.
And we gotta go roll call on this. Dan?
Aye.
Jim? Me? Aye.
Me.
We.
Maybe. So now, these numbers have to be changed if we sign this?
No, we can sign this.
We still
Yeah,
sign
we
it?
can sign that,
We signed
because that's
this.
the levy resolution.
Okay.
That's not gonna change.
And then I will send you a copy, all the copy of the revisions of that worksheet.
Is there anything else we need to do?
Nope, you can't use that's offensive.
Oh,
For a quarter.
So I had to borrow.
Thank you. Do an executive session.
Yeah.
Please. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
can't probably see him.
I was going to make some other comments.
No, go ahead.
I served 20 years on the county commission up in Brown County, and I served 8 years on the legislature. And I was off 2 years and served 4 years again as county commissioner up in Brown County. I think Jim mentioned that of the 66 counties, probably the county Milwaukee and Han County was the lowest of all the counties. Did I hear right?
Yep, still are.
Yeah. And I think to educate the public, the county's limited to 3% of cost of living, whichever is less, is a big, it's a big deal. Because the counties got stuck back, what year was it,
96.
96. And counties got the opportunity to opt out. Brown County tried it 3 times. Brown County's got 37,000 people. Han County's got 3,100. What happened in Brown County with roughly 27,000 population in the city, and about 13,000 or better in the rural areas, numbers don't come out right. But anyway, the city voted the opt-out attempt 3 times. And I think, and I don't know what the total taxes are that are collected in Han County. I heard somebody say 6 million, that was half.
Yeah.
So about 12 million. And the county, Han County's getting shy of 2.5 million of those property tax dollars.
Right.
How many of you went out to the hearings out in Pierre here this summer when they had that? And it angers me, because for 30 years I've watched this, figuring out how we're gonna fund county government. Well, up in Brown County, I had our county auditor make a pie chart of where the money goes. And granted, the mill levy is gonna be different for organized townships, it's gonna be different for fire districts, it's gonna be different for all those things. But what you'll see glaring at you is what the schools get. And they can talk out in Pierre until they can't talk anymore. And when they solve the funding problem for education, we won't have this problem funding county government. And if anybody paid any attention to what went on out in Pierre, I would go out there. Just for the simple fact that don't do you no good. Because they, the powers that be out there have got the people stuck. Property tax to fund education. And they're not gonna change that. And so here we are with counties going broke. And when Han County goes broke, then they'll shove you off to Fall County, or they'll shove you off consolidation. That was talked about in 96. We're gonna make it tough enough for the counties financially that you will consolidate. Really? That's what we want, is consolidated counties? I don't think so. Grassroots. That's what the people in South Dakota, right up through the center part of America, that's what we are. We're grassroots people. Why would we let a higher government tell us that we've got to consolidate? Somehow, we got to convince what's going on out in Pierre. I don't know how much money the Han County distributes. Well, it's pretty obvious if you're getting 12 million. Your schools, fire district, water, all of those, you're writing checks. The county's writing checks to all these other entities to the tune of 10 million bucks. Up in Brown County, it's 50 million that we're distributing out to all other entities. So funding county government is a big deal, and they're not taken the responsibility and appear to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
So,
Executive, we're all call for an executive session, I guess, for a personnel issue.
second.
I guess we're gonna go into executive session. Are we?
Can we take 5 minutes?
Yes, you can take 5 minutes.
Or then with budget stuff?
I think we're done with, yeah, I think you can go, we're done with